Let me just explain for those who are newcomers here this week, and thank you very much all for calling and joining in. We record all of these sessions and we then publish them all on a wiki. So if you've got questions or ideas or links, be very grateful if you put them into the chat, please, because the chat gets fully recorded and it all comes up and everything in there goes on to our AI search algorithm, which then makes it available to everybody on a search engine. So if you have questions, if you have links or whatever, please make full use of the chat to do that. I'm just waiting, giving a couple more minutes because there's a couple of faces I expected to see but haven't arrived yet. So please bear with us whilst we do that. So there's an audience today of very wide-ranging skills and knowledge. So I'm going to give a presentation that covers the basics that are in the call for questions that we're sort of being asked to answer. And there are some phrases in there which I think may need explanation. So initially, I'm going to explain things. So I apologize to those who are really already well versed in these matters. Please bear with me whilst we get to the exciting meat of the presentation, but I felt it was necessary to cover some basic terms first, which appear in the questions. And we are now at 5 minutes past, so that's our time limit for people to join. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to share a screen to start a presentation. Please bear with me whilst we get there. And then here we go. So we're going to be answering a call for evidence from the Energy Security and Net Zero Committee, or at least the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. And there are some terms in the calls for evidence which were sort of fairly new to me, or I wasn't sure what they involved. So I'm going to cover those briefly today. And so we have an agenda, which is where I'll be initially setting the scene and the context setting from the names that come up in the call for evidence. Then we'll go through what the call for evidence questions are. Then I'm going to ask for input from Joolz, who hasn't arrived yet, and Tristram, who has, but has no idea what he's going to say, because I think they'll be relevant to what we're going to be talking about. And then we'll get into the question and answer session, which will hopefully determine, A, if we want to actually answer anything, B, who's going to do it, and C, are there any other questions which this call makes clear that we'd love to have some more topics in future banter sessions. So if you've got ideas that trigger a thought in your head or anything like that, please throw it into the chat session and we'll go from there. So the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero was created only a couple of years ago, or rather less than that. And it took over from whatever the business, energy and infrastructure system was. And it's a full government department. So it has a Secretary of State in charge, which currently is Ed Miliband. And its oversight comes from a committee. And I'll give you the names of the people on the committee in the next slide, just in case you can see if there's anyone local from you, one of your local MPs. And their job is to make sure that the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, I don't know a quick way of saying that, DESNZ. Anyway, they have to satisfy the committee. What was that, sorry?
It's DESNZ.
DESNZ, thank you. Okay, we're on our way, good. That sounds like Joolz?
Yeah.
All right, so here is the list of MPs on the committee. By the way, I should have mentioned at the start that a copy of this presentation goes out to everybody. So you're all very welcome to sit back and relax and drink coffee rather than write down what I'm showing you, because it's all going to come to you anyway. So racing on. One of the first terms that I came across was Great British Energy, and I have to confess I hadn't heard of them before, so I took a look. And they're going to be a fairly large impact, I think, in our lives going forward, because they're going to be spending £8.3 billion over the next 5 years. And there's a caveat here that through the next few slides, you'll see that I've highlighted in various places that these people are all going to be working with local authorities. And I just checked with various sources what constitutes a local authority in the UK. And it varies depending on which source you look at. But if you're looking at a comprehensive source, then that includes parish councils. But if you're looking, as you'll see on a slide later, the term local authority may not go any further down than county councils. It all depends upon which part of the government you work in and whether you recognize that there really are people down at the parish level or whether we're all just ants down there. So here's a large organization. It's actually up and running. It's based in Aberdeen to win the Scottish vote. And it is actually up and running. So what it's going to do is help us get to net zero. They've got 5 functions, which we're going to go through, and they are going to be hopefully impacting us at the parish level. For those of you who are working at the parish level, pardons Cara. So moving on, here are the 5 functions. I've highlighted the ones which I think are particularly useful to us, but we're wide open to people to say, actually, you should be concentrating on one of the others. So again, because you're going to get the copy of this slide, I don't think I'm going to go through each of these pieces individually, just to show you what is available, what they're focusing on, and what we might want to discuss as we move ahead with answering the call for evidence. I thought it was worth highlighting that although the Great British Energy is still getting themselves off the ground, up and running, they do have £100 million to spend this year on helping things get going. So there is money for us to be chasing if we think it's worthwhile. A few more actions. Again, I looked at several websites about the Great British Energy, and they repeated themselves quite frequently, but with just little gentle changes here and there. So these 3 paragraphs say more or less the same thing, but I just thought that they were worth showing you how they are focusing on local authorities and communities, which I thought was very pertinent, and that we should be writing back to them as communities and local authorities down at the parish or county level, depending on whom you are. So they're really in place to get us to net zero. They'd like to get us there by 2030. Whether you think we can do that or not is an interesting question, but that's what they're setting out to do. And again, this is another source that describes what they're going to do, but I thought it was worth highlighting that the local power generation is considered to be an essential part of the energy mix, ensuring that communities own and benefit from clean power projects and from reducing pressures on the transmission grid. And Tristram, you should welcome this as a wonderful segue into your contribution shortly. Again, I've highlighted local authorities and communities are at the heart of restructuring the energy economy. So pretty big stuff for those of us down at the lower levels of local authorities. So they've done their first big partnership, which is with the Crown Estate, which brings all of those of you who are in shoreline counties. This might be of interest because the Crown Estate has a lot to do with the seabed, marine energy, and all that sort of stuff. So that's why this slide is in here, to show you that they're linked to Great British Energy. They're working together. They've already got started, and there's this huge floating wind leasing program in the Celtic Sea, which again it was news to me, certainly. My apologies for my ignorance. So another thing that the call for evidence refers to is the Community Energy Fund. So I thought I'd just let you know what that is. That's on a much smaller scale when it comes to money. It's been operating over a 2-year period. It had £10 million in grants to give to people. Had to do £5 million in the first year, which ended in the 31st of March of last year. And they got another 5 million to spend before the 31st of March this year. And I'm quite open to people to tell me I'm out of date and that's all been changed with the new government, but I haven't found anything that changes that. But the Community Energy Fund are for community-based organizations. And again, who defines a community? For the development of projects from concept to investable scheme. So it does not include the money to actually implement a scheme, but it certainly is the money to develop the idea in the first place. And I'm hoping again that a lot of you will find that this is pertinent to your areas, and that when you're thinking of ideas of what's coming up, certainly some of the stuff that Joolz or Tristram, I hope, are going to raise for you. You may like to know that there is some money available to talk about. These are the aims of the fund. And again, boringly, I focused on the community and the locally owned bit because that's, I think, we're all interested in. But basically, everything that can help us get our individual communities closer to net zero, then the Community Energy Fund is in place to help us get there. There is a time limit at the moment of the 31st of March of this year to access these funds. So if people are interested, they're going to have to get their skates on. Another item that is mentioned in the call for evidence is the local power plan. Now, the local power plan is actually a product of Great British Energy themselves. And it's basically the way in which they want to try and get communities working together, I think, in accordance with other local access, what's the word I'm looking for, plans. So it's there, it's in place to ensure that communities and local authorities are at the heart of restructuring the energy economy. Repeated again, rolling out small and medium scale renewable energy products using established technologies to develop lots of power. Now, this includes shared ownership products, which again, I hope we're going to get into shortly. But this is money which actually will invest in the capital expenses of building some of these things. So as opposed to the energy fund that we were just talking about, this is actually going to give you money to get things going and to actually build them. This system then moves on to talk about local area energy plans. And this is where we change our definition of local authorities, which I'll show you on the next slide. But think of a local area energy plan as being a way forward of trying to get people to work together. So it's an action plan for local leaders that accounts for action at the national level. So it's giving you technical evidence on how best to do it on a wide area scheme, but they're going to be working down at local authority level. And you've got examples here of trailblazer cities that are already working with the local area energy plan. So you've got templates to follow. I've given you a link here to get more information. But this local area energy plan comes with a major caveat, which is this. They cheerfully say it's a bottom-up data-driven wholesale system, and then they say it meets anybody from a city, district, or county council level. So bad luck to those of us who are down at communities and parish council levels. But I think you need to be aware that the LAAPs are there and are in place. Interestingly, they do not have a formal place in the local area planning, local authority planning system. So whereas the local authority has to take notice of local plans, local transport plans, they do not have to take notice of the LAEP. But I think they're going to be trying to improve that as time goes on. All right, so hopefully those were definitions that will help you understand what the questions are that the committee is calling for DESNZ. So here are the 7 questions that we're going to be discussing shortly. So I will just read through these to help you, those of you who sort of got fine eyesight issues or whatever. So how could the local power plan be produced by, or being produced by Great British Energy, build upon existing community energy support schemes, such as the Community Energy Fund? Some of these questions you may well feel we don't even want to bother with. And so when you're looking at these questions, please do form your own opinion as to which ones you think are worth answering from your point of view, because I'm not at all convinced that we as a whole want to answer all of the questions. And the call for evidence is very clear that you do not have to answer every question. You can just answer one if you wish. And of course, you don't have to answer any of them, but there is a template on their website, which we'll give you a link to, that shows you the form in which to answer should you wish to go it on your own. Question 2, how should the energy market and licensing regulations be reformed to enable community energy products to sell electricity they generate to local customers, and so on? So how do we remove barriers, and how do we remunerate the people generating the money, or generating the electricity, sorry. I think 3 is probably not going to affect us much, but how could existing government support mechanisms such as the Smart Export Guarantee provide community energy products with more financial certainty? Item 4, what are the regulatory solutions needed to minimize the high costs and long delays incurred in securing a grid connection for community energy projects? Segue there for Tristram. Should the local benefits of community energy projects be formally recognized as a material consideration in planning decisions? Now, that one I do think has got a lot of meat in it for us to talk about. Item 6, what should be the role of neighborhood plans and local area energy plans in building local support for community energy products? Again, that I see as a big question worth answering, or at least worth asking questions about. And finally, what's the potential for community energy to incentivize consumer demand, flexibility at the scale needed to achieve the net zero targets? So that's a fascinating question. So those are the 7 questions. Now, before we actually get into discussing them amongst ourselves, I've got a couple of, I think, inputs that we hope. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, Joolz, to let you have a chat about your recent news. And then I'll do the same thing for Tristram, where I'm hoping that you're going to talk about the ideas that we discussed yesterday, just in brief. And then we're mentioning these 2 inputs because I think they're going to be relevant to what we're going to be talking about. And then we can move on to answering the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And just in case, Tristram, you either want to show anything, or sorry, let's go with Joolz first, or just have the the attention of everybody.
Hi everyone, I'm Joolz from Community Climate Action, and we've got a community interest company in Suffolk called Suffolk Environmental Services. And we provide energy efficiency advice to homeowners. So the cheapest energy is no energy. And we're also actively engaged in promoting community renewable energy as a community group in Suffolk. And we've got some really interesting dynamics at the moment. First of all, I'm very excited that we've got a government that's taking climate change seriously and wants to implement a decarbonised energy plan for 2030. That's a world-beating target. And again, love them or loathe them, our government is taking a lead at COP, and so we are leading the world. And quite rightly so, seeing as how we led the world in the use of coal and the Industrial Revolution. And we've got a lot of historical emissions to make up for. Right now in East Anglia, we're having lots of nationally significant infrastructure projects, very large scale solar farms going through planning and being approved centrally. And we're also having a lot of pushback on that from communities who don't want large scale solar or onshore wind near their small hamlets and villages and don't want the farmland taken up by energy generation. It's a political hot potato, and actually in Suffolk, the county council have voted through a rooftop first policy and sort of putting their foot down a bit to stop solar farms being um, set up throughout Suffolk, which is a little bit of an oxymoron because policy for Suffolk County Council is we want to be the greenest county in England, and we have a net zero target for the whole county of 2030. So a little bit of um, conflict there. So we'll see what that comes out. So I'm delighted to participate in this consultation to actually see how we can communicate the benefits of cleaner, greener, cheaper energy to our communities, and perhaps look at a more distributed, smaller scale implementation that primarily benefits our communities. I think one of the objections is often the large national significant infrastructure projects are delivered by multinational corporations like Seneca and what have you. And so all of the revenue and benefits from the profit from the generation is just sucked out of the area anyway. Whereas if there was a community benefit fund from a community-owned renewable installation, that might change people's opinions. As Suffolk Environmental Services, we discovered yesterday, great news to start the year with, that we were successful in our Community Energy Fund application for £40,000 worth of funding to deliver a feasibility study for proposed 3 wind turbines and about 50 acres of what's called agrivoltaics. And agrivoltaics is essentially solar on stilts. So you still get productive horticultural or agricultural use of the land. So you get both. And this would be a community enterprise, and it's probably about 11 megawatt potential. To put that into context, depending on the power usage, that's in the region of 8,000, 10,000 homes maybe. So that's really quite significant. And we are going to be going through the process now of finding out whether or not it's feasible. Can we connect to a substation? Can we supply direct locally? Can we store the energy effectively? And invariably, we will probably face significant objections. There's always somebody that says no or doesn't like an initiative. So we'll be doing community consultation and community engagement to find out what people do want. And I think some of the challenges here are beyond the feasibility. The CEF fund then provides money for planning application. But then the CEF doesn't provide capital. So we have to then go and find our own capital. The capital for the project would be in the region of £6 to £7 million. And that would normally be raised via community shares, potential investment from self-invested personal pensions or SAS, patient capital. I know in the description of Great British Energy, they're encouraging public-private partnership. And certainly in terms of wind power, that's something Octopus have expressed an interest in. So we'll have some challenges in terms of raising the capital, but the first step is getting the community on board and really focusing on what the benefits are to the community. And then potentially going through planning. And of course, the thing with the feasibility study is it might not be feasible. The simple answer, it might come out and say, you can't do that. You can't do that here. So we're going to look at a number of different sites. But it's a really good start. So I'm delighted with the support that DESNZ are giving in that area and continuing the Community Energy Fund. DESNZ used to be BEIS, so it was the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department. I'm just have I got a link to the agrivoltaic project? Yes, I'll put a few up, not specifically to ours because it's mostly just grant documents and what have you, but definitely do have links to agrivoltaics. They're far ahead of us in Europe, and in Italy, I think they've legislated that any new solar farm must be agrivoltaics to enable dual use of land and not take productive farmland out of use. And there's really elegant examples throughout France with viticulture, and in Germany they're growing hops, and elsewhere in Kenya they're growing brassica that like shade, so that's your broccoli and your cauliflower and similar. So there's lots of opportunities. So yeah, I'll pop some links in the chat when I finish talking. So these kind of questions are really interesting, and one of the key questions I'm particularly interested in is, well, who will buy the energy? You know, where are we going to send it? And I'm particularly keen for people to be prosumers and sort of use the energy at the point of generation to avoid having to transport it essentially. So particularly interested in how we facilitate microgrids in our communities, how we enable sleeving agreements. And a sleeving agreement is where you can have a particular offtaker, be it a local authority, for instance, who guarantee to buy your energy. And it's kind of sleeved through the grid and it's your energy. But equally, they're trying to do that in Bristol with Bristol Energy Co-op at the moment, with Bristol City Council, and they're struggling to get the legal, or it's been a long, difficult process, and they've yet to finalise it, to be able to offtake that energy. So this consultation is super important for us to respond to and highlight these challenges and areas of support and what we would like to see as communities moving forward. What would we like to see and where? Who would we like to own the infrastructure, and where should the profits go? Those are the sort of key questions at the top of my mind. So I'll leave it on those questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not the expert in the room. That's probably John Taylor and others that have previously worked for the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, and or now works for Community Energy England. So I'll stop there. The other thing of note is it was noted in your presentation about data, Graham, about lack of data and lack of standardization for local area energy planning. And that's, again, a topic that's close to our heart with Tristram in terms of how we map stuff and how we get that data standardization and actually start a plan, because every journey starts with a map. And if we're going to have a plan, we need to map it out. So thank you.
Joolz, thank you so much. I'm sure people are going to have questions for you, but let me just segue from what you were talking about microgrids into Tristram for his ideas, and then we'll open up the chat to everybody to have a go. So Tristram, all yours, please.
Thank you very much. I feel you've very overhyped what I've got to say, because we're at the very early stages of looking at a program in Hart, which is a district in Hampshire that's got 21 parishes. And we're working with Alex Templeton, who talked to this group some time ago about his CSGO project. So Alex Templeton's idea, his company's idea, is that they are raising funding to make it possible to put solar on residential roofs across a parish. And the idea is they will pay the upfront costs, and in return, the person who has his panels on his roof and doesn't pay for them, they pay as they use the energy. So CSGO will recover the costs of the energy over the 10-year period. And that lowers the barriers to people joining in such a parish level scheme. So and they've agreed to use Hart as an area to test this. They've done some testing in Essex and West Sussex already, and it seems to go well. And so we're the next on the list. And David Morgan-Jones, who's also on this call, is helping me and Alex to promote this to Hart. Hart has just agreed that they want to do it and they're going to support it. So we're ready to go. So one of the things I then did, which is what Graham's interested in me to talk about, is we did a model in Parish Online to say what is the capacity of residential roofs in each parish, and how does that compare to the domestic energy load that the parish currently has, which comes from the impact, the Centre for Sustainable Energy Impact Assessment. So that CSE impact tells you for every parish in the country what the domestic energy load is for heating, housing, and what sort of stuff. We've also added on to that the EV charging, the potential EV charging load, assuming that every resident in a parish has 2 cars that do the average mileage. So we wanted to understand that. And I just got the preliminary results of that for Hart District. And just so that you can understand that, if we look at the domestic load, looking at all the roofs, that covers an average of 28%. of the domestic load, which I think is quite a high number. Of course, that assumes, by the way, that all that energy can be used to cover the domestic load, which of course it can't, which brings me on to storage, energy storage and recovery systems later on. So if you use just the residential roofs, it's an average of 14% of the domestic load is covered. If you look at domestic and EV charging, it's 24% for all the roofs and 11% for just residential roofs. So the thought then struck me at a very early stage that I think those numbers are encouraging. And if you could add some agrivoltaics or some local wind power, you could get to a sort of theoretical 100%, I think, of the power being locally generated, provided, again, you had an energy storage and recovery system, which seems to me like a very good thing to look at, because we know that the upgrades to the grid to be able to take all this energy are very expensive and very long term. And I think for new, I've just heard from a nephew that they've been told that their energy, their wind farm connection to the grid won't be until 2035. So we're talking, about a 10-year delay. So that seems to be a massive problem. And of course, maintaining a national transmission grid is very expensive and very unpopular in planning terms. So it seems to me there is potential to lower the load on the transmission grid by having district level, that sort of size, energy storage and recovery systems, which could be pump storage, it could be hydrogen, it could be whatever else, lots of systems, compressed air, hot salt. There's all sorts of things in which I know, by the way, very little about, but I know they're expensive. But my thought was maybe they're not expensive compared to the planning of the grid. And then the other thing that occurs to us is that the defense and security issues around the grid, offshore wind farms are very vulnerable to attack. The cables coming in are very vulnerable to attack. The transmission lines are very vulnerable to attack. And that's becoming a serious problem in the new Europe we all know and love. So the other great benefit of more resilient local storage and local generation and storage would be massive resilience compared to what we have now. So that's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, Tristram. Just what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much. I'm going to put up the last slide of my presentation, which is actually just the repeat of the 7 points, so that we can go through them in some sort of orderly fashion and just say, does anyone want to say anything about this one, or we'll move on? If you've got individual questions that are not necessarily pertinent to the call for evidence, then could you please either put them in the chat or reserve them for towards the end of the meeting, so that we can at least get through the agenda in some sort of orderly fashion, and then we'll open up for the usual Q&A sessions. So let me just go back to sharing the slides. So we've done Tristram. Let's come up to here and see if we can go into a slideshow. Yeah. And so the point really we're discussing now is, do we want to do anything about the call for evidence? There is an extraordinary timeline that we have to finish by the 5 o'clock on Monday. And here are the questions that we're being asked to answer. So let me just ask, is there anybody who wants to have a contribution towards number 1, please? That's a good one.
Gary's got a hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I can't see that whilst I'm looking at that. Perhaps,
Graham, sorry, I just wanted to make a point. Sorry, I should have made this before you started. I did talk to Alex about this issue, and he said that there have been very similar, I don't know anything about it again, but he said there have been very similar calls for evidence over the last few years that cover all these questions. And so he said all that information is already available to Great British Energy. And so his thought was that we may be, it's a lot of work reproducing stuff that's already been covered.
Right. Okay, thank you. Could I just ask you, Andrew, if you could call out the questions, because I can't see the screen here at the moment. Maybe I
Can I just start by referring people to the link that I put at the beginning of the chat that I think everyone should see?
The very first one, Cara, that you gave.
Community Energy England have done a lot of work on collaborating with community energy entities to respond to these questions, and whether it will be useful for people who do want to respond to read or input to that.
Good, thank you. Yeah, very good.
Okay.
I'm moving on to Tom now. Sorry, I can now see Andrew. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm project manager at Carbon Co-op, and I just want to sort of underscore what Cara just said. We're putting in our own submission, and it's going to be much more targeted than the broad scope presented by the Community Energy England response. But you can't go anywhere better, really, than looking at the Community Energy England response for the types of talking points that you would want to cover.
So Tom, if you're obviously familiar with it, or Cara, which either is, do they obviate the need for us to do anything at all at our end? Is it all covered by them already?
Since I have the mic, I'll jump in on there. And I think no, I think one of the minimum things you could do as an organization would be to scan the community and the CEE response for points that you agree to and say, we refer to the Community Energy England response, we endorse, and particularly pull out points. And I think that would be the minimum and easiest thing you could do. More voices is going to help.
And I see you nodding, Cara, so thank you. Nothing more to add to that one? Okay. We've got your hands up from Dan.
Yeah, I work for the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and we're going to respond as well. And yeah, I'd sort of encourage you all to do so too. And I suppose what I kind of think is that the local power plan has huge potential to kind of build on and scale up the work that's already being done by the kind of Community Energy Fund and similar things. So we're talking about like sort of convening debate, like talking to existing sort of parish councils and existing community organisations about the potential for kind of community-owned renewables, supporting action, helping those groups turn aspirations into actual plans, sharing data and expertise, access to funds. These are all the things that we think are needed in order to scale up sort of action and the potential of the local power plan to deliver on. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you. Amanda?
Hello, everybody. I'm coming at this from my parish council roles, so where I'm a clerk to a parish council and also a parish councillor, and also I'm an exec member of Gloucestershire Association of Parish and Town Councils, and I would like us to start in the introductory paragraph by saying what's unique about our submission. And our submission, which really follows on, is consistent with what Tom and Cara have just said. But where we add value and why our submission is necessary, in my opinion, is because we give the unique view representing parish and town councils. And I think, therefore, we need to be really clear on what we're assuming the definition is. So, in other words, we are part of community, not part of local authority. But we work very closely with local authority. And it may well be that the body that is receiving this evidence is not clear on this themselves. So I think we need to be crystal clear what angle we're coming from in saying what we're adding, and then saying what we're doing as far as the great collaboration is concerned, and that we've got a database and a connection of networks that could be very useful to them, and give a contact detail so that they can come back to us and our network for the future, so that we create for ourselves a soft power of influence, etc., but also give them very much a knowledge that in the same way that NALC is a different body to LGA, there is a body that represents all of parish and town councils that exist separately to local government, i.e. districts and above, and that as the reorganisation of local authorities is taking place, the role for parish and town councils is only going to increase in its part to play within community. So that's the part in particular at the moment I would like to say right up front before we started addressing each of the individual local specific questions 1 to 7 there. Thank you.
That's really helpful, Amanda, and I do think it was very valid, so thank you. Gordon, please.
Hello. Yeah. I'm focused on this from the point of view of working with the county council in Herefordshire, in a voluntary mode, and also having had 12 or 15 years experience now of community energy projects, director of 4 of them. One of the key issues right now, we're in a wonderful state where we actually might be able to get something done in terms of energy, and with this present government, that's great. But many of the aspects that we need, and Joolz had already referred to them, require public cooperation. So I think absolutely urgently, this group and many other groups like it around in the UK should focus on how to communicate to the general public about the energy transition and for their choices, and in order to get as many people as possible not being an NIMBY to all the things that need to be done in terms of pylons and generation. So if that requires, as it would do, government investment as well, then we should respond to that in the form of the relevant questions that we can adapt to that direction on this survey. That's it for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gordon. Yeah, I'm sort of forming opinions as to what sort of replies we need to make as great collaboration, which is really being helped by what people have said so far. So that was all generated by question 1. Let's move on to question 2. Again, just any fresh thoughts on how do we remove the barriers and how do we remunerate people who are generating electricity locally? Oh my gosh, the world's gone berserk. Gordon, off you go again.
It's simply to refer to the wonderful work being done by Energy Local, and I don't know how.
Am I alone in losing Gordon?
Nope.
No.
Gordon, we lost you there. Are you back with us? No, you're not.
No,
We've lost your sound.
We've lost him.
You have to put it into the chat, please, Gordon, unless you can fix your microphone, because we ain't hearing anything from you.
Perhaps I could pick up while Gordon's fixing his sound.
Go ahead, Joolz, please.
Yeah, Energy Local is a co-op that will be the supplier potentially of. So there's a difference between being a generator and being a supplier. And Energy Local, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gordon. I know
Is that better now?
Oh, that's better. You crack on.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So well done, Joolz. Yeah, it's simply to briefly illustrate the difficulty that Energy Local have had in order to create this wonderful system. So they've got about 30 projects now around the UK, and they've had to work with energy suppliers like Octopus, who've just unfortunately pulled out, and now they're limited with one or maybe 2 other energy suppliers that will work with them. And as some of you know, to get energy from a local generation to local buildings and local houses is an incredibly complicated and convoluted and ancient way of doing things. And it's really, really difficult to achieve. But what we need is a situation where we can put a megawatt or a couple of megawatt of whatever types of generation up and provide it at a reasonable price to those local communities, and that's a really high priority, I think, in for this point number 2.
Could I just ask, Gordon, is anybody considering creating a local microgrid that's entirely independent of the national grid?
Well, that's private wire, and yes, you can do that, but it really only makes cost-effective sense when you've got sufficient storage and you've got sufficient size of usage. So you can do it. I mean, the heat network, I think, in Suffolk is a good example of that, not in electricity, but in terms of heat. And that was a funded project that's still ongoing at Swaffham, I think it is. You probably know about that, Joolz. But it's really makes most sense to use the grid wherever possible. So always try and use the grid, because the grid is effectively your energy store. So
we had this 10-year delay on hooking up to the grid.
Yes, but you can still, that means you can't pass new energy to the grid. It doesn't mean that community can't benefit from still being connected to the grid and take energy from the grid should the local power not be available. So you can cap and not be allowed to export, but you can still you can still put generation on. I mean, most of our projects, I'm a director of big solar co-op around the country, are now being capped. And so we're not allowed to export, but we can make a big difference to the energy use of the large businesses that we're providing power to via a solar system on the roof. I'll put a link in the chat about big solar co-op for those that aren't familiar with it.
How does that equate with the 2030 target for net zero in energy generation if you got a 10-year delay before you can hook up any new generator to the system?
It's horrific, but the 70 billion that has finally been agreed by Ofgem for the DNOs to be allowed to be spent on the grid reinforcement, which has just gone through this past month, will make a big difference. But of course, we can't do magic in the speed of that. But prior to this, I mean, Herefordshire, for example, and Telford and Shropshire and all of that area have been advised it's a sliding scale date of 2032 to 2036 before we can have any big changes to the grid. And that's how it is at present. And that's totally totally crazy. But that's why I come back to this high priority of ensuring that many, many more thousands and millions of people are aware of what's needed to be done for pylons and for the grid, because we're not going to put it underground. It's crazy too, and the government has already declared they're not going to put increased infrastructure underground. So therefore, we need a real acceptance of the urgency of having pylons and a change in some cases to our views.
I'm reminded of some Giles cartoons back in the 60s where he had the entire country covered in pylons, but never mind.
Some of you may have seen the pylons in the Somerset area from the new nuclear power station, and they're many people think they're quite a nice artistic,
they're much improved
sculpture.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. Thank you very much, Gordon. Can we move on to Pete, please? Pete West.
Hi, yeah. Following on about Energy Local, I'm Secretary and Director of Energy Local Bridport, which was the first Energy Local club in England. There's 8 or 9 in Wales. But out of the 30, there's only 10 actually operational. And there's just a huge demand, but the barriers are huge as well. Basically, the technology exists to meter electricity and meter household consumption and divide the export from centralized generation to householders. We've been doing it for 3 years now with virtually no problem with Octopus Energy. The only problem is that Octopus decided to roll out their own business model, their wind turbine fan club, and not support community groups anymore. At the moment, I mean, it's perhaps ongoing dialogue with Octopus. So that's the issue. Technically, it's possible. At the European level, it's developing rapidly. The European Commission and the European Parliament have passed legislation requiring electricity supply companies to provide metering and billing for local energy sharing. And it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, our householders, we've only got a 50 kilowatt wind turbine and 50 householders, but they're saving 20% on their electricity bill, and the wind is supplied at 15p a kilowatt hour. You know, I sometimes get a bit despondent feeling that our whole energy system is completely I don't know, so not exactly corrupt, but basically electricity is sold at the price of fossil fuels, when if you can separate out renewables, I mean, it's much cheaper. We've got a planning permission for 250 kilowatts of ground-mounted solar to supply 200 more households, community-owned solar, and basically with a well-tried business model, it would be sold at about 14p, and that could pay 5% interest. It's just crazy that people are paying over the odds for fossil fuels. And yeah, anyway, I'm a bit too negative, but on the whole, Energy Local model, I think, will be transformative, and it is being transformative in mainland Europe.
So, Pete, is it safe to say that the points that you've raised are being made in response to this call for evidence, or do you feel they've been made sufficiently in the past?
Here you go. I mean, Energy Local with quite a few other organisations have submitted it with Community Energy England and Bath and West Community Energy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if you put a link to that document in the chat, then we could do what we were asked earlier to support it and endorse it, because you know, the more that we can endorse what's already been told to the committee, then the better.
Graham, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm don't know if I'm alone, but I really don't quite understand what Energy Local is. Could somebody give me a 1-sentence description?
enabling
Yeah,
people
okay,
to
so
buy
we-
electricity generated locally, but it's sleeved through energy suppliers. So that's already, in some terms, as Pete has said, a limitation if you've got energy suppliers that aren't linking that purchase and supply to the householder. So then I
Yeah.
wanted to take it to the next level, which is to support the local electricity bill, which I've also put a link in, which is also legislating for change. It wants to decouple electricity prices from fossil fuels that Pete has alluded to, because it's artificially inflating renewable energy costs, which we know is actually cheaper than fossil fuels. So there's elements in that as well, which can be referred to in this support.
But just to be clear, does Energy Local, it's not a private wire, it's using the grid local wiring.
Yeah, but you're linking to the same substation, so that's a
Thank you.
limitation. So you can only group people to that one point, whereas what we want to do is enable more people to be able to purchase from different points that local generation is going into.
Thank you.
Fascinating. Thanks, Cara. Did you have your own point you wanted to make, or is that?
It was again just referring back to work that's already been done and a link to the local electricity bills in there, which can be referred to in this response that meets those kind of questions it's asking. And that's
Really
also
helpful.
something to lobby your MP to support as well, because we need that to be supported at the government level, which will help to unlock some of these barriers.
Excellent. Thank you. Joolz.
Thank you. Loads of great stuff. I think the primary thing is let's not reinvent the wheel. That's not really what we're here to do. It's really to put the great work that's been done in front of us all and collectively learn. I think it's been a learning journey for you, Graham, just producing the slides. I'm certainly learning as we go. And so it's part of that engagement process, engagement and discussion that I think Gordon made the point that what's really important is that we understand what's going on. I'm a parish councillor, as are many on the call, and I think we're uniquely positioned because National Association for Local Councils now, with whom town and parish councils are members, are not doing a response for this. And John from Community Energy England, and John stopped moving now, so he can probably contribute himself, says it's really important that as many people respond as possible. So yeah, we're all going to go and review, I think, what's already been written and produced, and learn from that. There's lots of technical detail that I'm unsure of and I'm still learning about for us to be able to facilitate a response. And I think Amanda's right, we've got a real opportunity here to be a voice of town and parish councils, because we will be a part of this journey. We are the community, and often it's easier for us to, we kind of know the lie of the land and be able to communicate with our communities from a parish level rather than perhaps district, and we'd be working closely with local authorities. We've got a smart energy microgrid in West Suffolk that's again around it's a West Suffolk Council initiative. It's been going for about 5 years now around a single substation, works particularly well delivering energy direct to businesses. So I'm really keen on sort of finding out how we do that and supporting initiatives like Energy Local, so we can guarantee our income. I mean, that's, when you're looking at any project, what you want to know is well, where's my income coming from, and how can we deliver that? How can we deliver that locally? And much of that revolves around where do we get the data from? How much the CSE impact calculator is an estimate. So that's perhaps something we can help with as well, is actually providing that kind of data and actually collecting that data as well, potentially. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the discussion. It's fabulous to have so many people inputting. But as John makes the point from Community Energy England, even if we crib from the existing submissions from those who are with more expertise than us, rather than reinventing the wheel, it's just adding voices and adding calls for the right things from the community and from town and parish councils.
Well, Jules, your penultimate argument was a classic segue in for Dan Stone, so let's go to Dan.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a bit of a wider point really about the importance of being able to sort of buy locally generated electricity in terms of building support, really, in that we've kind of run this future energy landscape workshops, which you might have heard of. We've run it about 17 times, and there's 20 odd workshops now being run by kind of community energy groups. And basically in almost all of those sessions, we found this incredibly strong narrative that sort of increasing local renewable energy generation can sort of support local self-sufficiency, basically. And so people really get the sort of benefits of being able to sort of buy electricity locally, and it's, you know, from local community energy generation. And it could be really powerful in terms of sort of building support and getting us to a clean energy system, basically. So it's a bit of a wider point, but thank you for sharing that, Cara. Cara's just shared the link.
Moving on to Amanda, please.
Yeah, this is now with my other hat on, well, one of my many other hats on, of being a political economist. So from my professional sort of standpoint, it strikes me that there's market issues, and there's been some discussions going on in chat. And I wonder whether there's a consensus, whether I'm picking this up correctly, that actually if Competition and Markets Authority looked at the current market, or markets, I should say, because there's lots of different elements going on to the way that things are priced, things are connected up, stored, distributed. There's lots of elements there that maybe are sticky at best and not working at most, or maybe aren't fit for purpose for the new world of, you know, not just burning stuff to create energy that go through wires. So I'm just wondering whether, do people see there being any advantage, or am I alone in thinking that it could be good to call for the Competition and Markets Authority to actually look at the places? Question.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at question 2 on the screen, Amanda, where we're looking to do without the current barriers. And I would have thought that your idea of the CMA getting involved would certainly not hurt.
Sometimes people see involving CMA as slowing things up. It's like yet another inquiry, but actually the call for evidence that they do as part of the process could be considerably useful.
Okay.
And given that nothing's going to move that quickly, perhaps it would be helpful, but I don't know. Joolz has got his hand up. There might also be that some elements that are the most needed have already been looked at. I don't know. Question mark.
Joolz.
I think what we've heard today is these same questions have already been asked. The same information's been gathered. It's a new government. They're going through the process again. And we might just be able to lend some weight to the existing perceived wisdom. And in relation to your question about markets, I think the point Cara made, I think it was Cara, is probably the most important from my perspective, is decoupling the cost of renewables from fossil fuels. I mean, if we're tied to a gas price, no consumer is ever going to realise or see the benefit. We held a community energy workshop in Great Dunmow recently with the community, looking at community renewable energy, and there were a couple of very awkward people there with very awkward questions. And one of them was, why do we have the highest electricity price in Europe when all of this renewable is supposed to be cheap? And it was very difficult for me to convey that it was actually the price of gas and the geopolitical situation, and the cost of North Sea gas obviously goes to the highest bidder, so it's a global supply chain. So I think that's one of the most critical things we can impress upon the government is please decouple those things, because then as consumers we can understand, well, if I'm buying fossil fuel energy, it's going to cost me more money, and they'll vote with their wallet. The marginal cost of consumption in Germany a while ago was literally hitting zero, and most recently they were paying people to take energy because there's so that also supports the public cooperation and focus on communications that Gordon mentioned. So yeah, I think there's a real market case, definitely.
Okay, I think I'm hearing as a quick summary, just to say where we are at the moment, that people are telling me that every one of these questions has already been answered, and that perhaps our greatest function, and I'm now speaking as a member of Great Collaboration, would be to go through all of your links and support those points that have already been made, in particular the point that we can represent the local community, the parishes and the small community organizations, to the great British Energy people. And I guess give examples of what we're supporting from all the links that you've given, and state that there's a very powerful task that we can do by tying together all of the efforts that are being made all across the country and presenting them as a sort of a more of a national opportunity and a need to be met by the various suggestions that have been made. That immediately has obviously called up questions in people's minds. So Andrew?
Yes, just to say, absolutely agreeing with you. And if there are other examples that we've heard about today, local examples or from other sources that we can add into a response, then that's just going to make it more effective, I think. So if there's, it helps to say, yes, we're not just speaking on behalf of the local, here are some local examples. Yeah, so
Perfect.
absolutely agree with you. Thanks.
Thank you. And the other Andrew Warnes. You're muted, Andrew. Can you unmute?
Yeah, right. Just another thought as well is one of the things that's clearly required to undertake some of these projects is to develop assets and land that's necessary to generate the energy. Some coherent thinking in government is required for this, and they've just done away with one of the major elements, which is the community ownership fund, which would have helped us in one of the projects where we were trying to pull together for local generation. And unless we can get some sort of source of coherent funding, then we're going to be stymied in taking these things forward. So some sort of coherent thoughts for overall funding, not just the funding of the generation itself, would be helpful.
So the CSGO system that Tristram referred to and Alex Templeton, whereby they come up with the upfront costs of implementing everything, but then they get it back from the individual consumers. Is that something that could be done on a national level successfully, that the government could fund all of these things so there's no upfront cost and they're going to get a long-term flow of money from the consumers who are going to be paying smaller electricity bills over the next couple of decades? I've got stunned silence from Andrew.
Not sure.
Hugely
Not sure is a good answer. Good
I mean,
answer.
Right. Let's
just
move
to
on.
answer your question there, Graham. Yes, I mean, if Alex Templeman can find the capital to basically put rooftop solar on, and people can then pay it on a monthly basis, like that was what revolutionized software.
Yeah.
Software as a service. You don't pay 400 quid for a Microsoft CD, you pay 5 quid a month. All of a sudden it changes, so that is will change the market. I think what Andrew was referring to was probably the capital cost of, say, land or availability of land and or the properties themselves. And again, I think that's an area where we as councillors, parish town councillors, can have influence, and also as districts will have influence. And as a good example, one of the town councillors from Great Dunmow mentioned that Great Dunmow own 100 acres of land and a town hall and a number of properties. But perhaps within this consultation, we should be also thinking, and I'm not sure, and I haven't reviewed all the CE staff, so it might already be in there, is then how we fund the capital cost of either an asset, land, and or the installation of renewable energy, primarily through novel forms of finance, public-private partnership, blended partnership, with community municipal investment bonds, for instance, underwritten by a local authority. There's precedent for that. There are councils already doing it, which makes the cost of capital lower and reduces the risk, particularly if there's partnership. So it might be asking the government to actually support that local authority borrowing, because there's money costs money, so it just depends where you get it from. So there might be avenues for Public Works Loan Board borrowing or community municipal investment bonds to fund this transition moving forward.
Yeah, I'm horrified about the rates that Public Works loan borrowing costs. So, but I do think that
gone up a
If
lot.
you're going to work on an area basis, then why not work on the entire country basis and have the government borrow the money from the capital markets? But the markets will like it because there's a guaranteed income coming from the consumers.
Yeah, it's kind of safe.
Consumers are always going to need to be paying for their electricity, so why not fund it on a national basis?
Absolutely. Well, in terms of revenue, energy is always going to have going to generate revenue. It's kind of safe as houses.
Yes.
I think the public works loan board borrowing has gone up when we had historically low interest rates from around 1 or 2%, sort of 0.5% cost of borrowing and 2% charged. It's gone up to about 6 or 7.
Yep.
I think we've benchmarked the cost of capital about 14% in our CEF application. So that gives you an idea of scale. And again, the more we can reduce that cost of borrowing or cost of money, then the more feasible it becomes to deliver these kind of projects.
Yep, agreed. Thanks, Joolz. Cara, please.
Just to say that there are several organisations looking at more affordable virtual power plants. So again, that kind of scheme where you would pay monthly for solar on your roof and a discounted energy supply. So we need to make sure that's community owned. Town and parish councils have got land and opportunities to access, particularly their preset. We've got much larger capabilities of utilising their local council tax to be able to invest in community projects. So that's an option for them to put in their own renewables. And of course, linked to community energy entities like myself and Pete and so on the call are involved in, who can raise social funding to be able to install. And particularly if you can link that to high energy users, you can bypass the grid in particular. So linking to maybe some local industry as a way for them to purchase all of that electricity generated are several other options that is worth noting. But I guess the most important one, we need to really stamp out all this ridiculous profiteering through fossil fuel industry. We need to decouple the support that government is still giving with tax breaks, and that would help to ensure that renewable energy becomes the priority and not still feeding the fist that is causing all the problems in the first instance. So what we can do to ensure that we can access local energy generation is something that parish councils need to be demanding.
Right, and I'm going to write all this by 5 o'clock on Monday.
In your own time, starting from now.
Yes, it's wonderful stuff being produced here. Ideas flowing left, right, and centre. Pete West, please.
Very simple one. In terms of raising finance, I'm sure people are probably aware the local power plan includes £400 million a year for community energy groups for low interest loans and 600 million a year for local authorities as 100% grants. This is in the local power plan. So, I mean, most community energy groups with share offers, pay about 5% interest. Certainly our business model is fine at 5% interest. If the government want more than that, it's not actually a low interest loan, but you will still need that risk development capital. This is the Community Energy Fund, and that would need to be expanded considerably if you're going to develop projects up to 400 million a year. And that absolutely is a huge amount of money. It's probably 50 times more than existing community energy schemes.
Well, the Community Energy Fund ends in March anyway at the current rate, doesn't it? But yeah, I take your point. I think looking at the time, if people have got any urgent questions to ask, now is the time. But otherwise, I'm going to summarize by saying I'm going to publish the results of this call on the wiki as soon as I can. And there will be an AI summary of everything that's been said and all the ideas that have been put. And then I think I'm going to commit myself to coming up with a response that hopefully incorporates most of what people have suggested today, in particular the business that we represent the community level, which nobody else seems to, B, that we want to endorse things that have already been said in the past, and C, that we really, really want to separate the cost of renewable energy from existing sources that are wasteful and toxic and not desired. I do see that there were some days in the past year when renewables were producing by far the most electricity, rather over the what's the word I'm looking for, the polluting sort, and that we have shut down the last coal-fired station. So we are making progress, but I think I'm going to undertake as a result of today's call to come up with an answer which I will whiz around to people if they happen to have any spare time themselves. Bad luck to those of you who thought you were going to get away with doing nothing on Sunday. and we'll carry on from there. But if you've got other ideas, now is the time to put them, please. And Joolz, you've already got one.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thanks, everyone, Cara, Pete, Dan, and everyone for the input. It's been fascinating learning and having these kind of get-togethers because we're all stronger together. I know John from Community Energy England is on the call, and his responsibility is capacity building. I don't know if you're still there, John, or if you might want to say anything. Have we covered what we need to say? And perhaps those of us that are parish councillors and town councillors on the call, we can specifically name our town and parish councillors in our response.
Hey, can you all see me and hear me?
Yep.
Okay. No, thanks for all that. No, I think, yeah, town and parish councils, the other valuable things you can get across is that communities and parishes do want to see renewable energy. I'm sure a lot of them will be hearing from commercial energy developers saying, get rid of the community from the development process, speed things up by bypassing local involvement. And I don't think that will help anyone in the long run. So I think, yeah, communities coming forwards with, like Dan mentioned, the future energy landscapes type models involving people in the design and allocation of sites for renewables, getting it into local ownership, showing people the tangible benefits of the net zero transition. I think, yeah, I'd love to see the clean power mission, the 2030 target, democratized so that every parish and town council feels they've got something to contribute to it. So, yeah, I think you're very well placed to make that point at the moment. So thanks. Hopefully I'll be able to come into these in the future.
Thank you, John.
Very well said, John. Excuse me
Yes.
jumping in, but
Indeed.
very well said. And I'm
So well said. I'm hoping you might be able to just quickly type that up into an email or a message so we can just slot it right in there.
Yes.
Although we do have the transcript and it is being recorded, so.
If John doesn't have time, I'll be able to scrape it from the speech to text provision that Zoom is doing nowadays, so that we will have a copy of it. Thank you all so much for your contributions. I really have been very impressed, as always, by the wide-ranging knowledge that people have got amongst our listeners and attendees. Thank you so much, everyone, for pitching in, and those of you who thought that they were going to spend the rest of the week in peace and quiet, bad luck, because I should be hounding you for things that you've said and said, you've got any other, I'm stuck here, can you help out? But I think the conclusion is that we do have to answer this, that we should do it as great collaboration, although, of course, I'm not going to prevent anyone from doing it on their own for their own local organization. And please do feel free to write to me should you wish to make any points that you think of in the next few hours. I'm very grateful to everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
you.
And
well done, mate.
we'll see you next time. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.